I never imagined that one careless mistake would rewrite my entire existence. The office buzzed with its usual Monday chaos. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. I sat at my desk organizing quarterly reports when my boss appeared beside me without warning. Dawson Cross, the CEO of Cross Industries, stood there in his immaculate charcoal suit, not even glancing my direction as he issued his command. "Austin, I need those financial projections printed immediately. Use my laptop in my office. The files are already open. I'm heading to the conference room." Before I could respond, he was gone, his expensive cologne lingering in the air. I gathered my things and walked toward his corner office, that glass-walled sanctuary where million-dollar decisions happen daily. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside, immediately struck by how pristine everything looked. Minimalist desk, perfectly aligned pens, not a single paper out of place. His laptop sat open on the massive oak desk, screen dark but humming softly. I pressed the spacebar and the screen flickered to life. What I saw made my heart stop completely. The desktop wasn't filled with spreadsheets or corporate documents. Instead, folders covered the screen, dozens of them, and every single one had my name attached. Austin morning arrival times, Austin lunch preferences, Austin phone conversations, Austin smile analysis. My hands started trembling as I stared at the monitor, unable to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. There had to be some logical explanation. Against every instinct screaming at me to walk away, I clicked on a folder labeled Austin Office Behavior Study. Hundreds of photographs filled the screen. Pictures of me at my desk, typing on my computer. Pictures of me in the break room pouring coffee. Pictures of me standing by the window during my afternoon break, staring at the city skyline. Some were clearly taken from security camera footage, but others were zoomed in so closely I could see individual strands of my hair, the small scar on my knuckle from a childhood accident, the exact way I bit my bottom lip when concentrating on difficult tasks. My stomach twisted violently. I clicked another folder. This one contained what looked like diary entries. Text documents filled with observations written in first person. March 15th. He wore the navy sweater again today. It brings out the gold flecks in his eyes that most people miss. He doesn't realize how beautiful he is when he's lost in thought. I watched him for 47 minutes during the morning meeting. He only looked up twice. Another entry. April 3rd. He hummed while filing documents today. Some melody I didn't recognize, but it was the most perfect sound I've ever heard. I recorded it. I've listened to it 63 times since this afternoon. I'm losing control of this. I don't want to stop. The most recent entry was dated last week. He stayed late finishing the Henderson proposal. Everyone else had gone home. I watched him through the security feed. The way he runs his fingers through his hair when he's tired. The way he stretches his neck and shoulders. I wanted to go to him, to touch him, to make him understand that he belongs to me. But not yet. Soon. He'll know everything soon. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred at the edges. This was stalking. Methodical, obsessive, terrifying stalking. How long had this been happening? How had I never noticed? The room felt too small, too hot. I needed to leave. I needed to run. Looking for something, Austin? Dawson's voice came from directly behind me, and I spun around so fast I nearly knocked over his desk lamp. He stood in the doorway, one hand casually in his pocket, his expression completely calm. Those steel gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. There was no anger in his gaze, no embarrassment at being caught, no shame whatsoever, just raw, undiluted focus, like a predator watching prey that had just realized it was trapped. Sir, I was just trying to print." My voice came out strangled and pathetic. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded deafening in the sudden silence. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said conversationally, as if we were discussing weather patterns instead of his extensive stalking operation. "But now that you have, I suppose we need to address the situation." He moved closer, each step deliberate and measured. "So tell me, Austin, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Are you terrified right now, or are you curious? Both." "Neither." I didn't know anymore. My brain screamed at me to run, to call security, to do something rational. But my body remained frozen, rooted to the expensive carpet beneath my feet. because underneath the fear pulsing through my veins, there was something else. Something I didn't want to acknowledge. A tiny traitorous part of me that felt noticed, seen, important. Sir, this is... I struggled to find words that made sense. This isn't appropriate. This is illegal. You've been watching me, collecting information about me without my consent. Obsessing over you, he corrected. Now standing close enough that I could see the slight stubble on his jaw, could smell the coffee on his breath. Let's use accurate terminology, Austin. I've been obsessed with you for 6 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. Since the moment you walked into your interview wearing that gray suit that didn't fit quite right because you'd borrowed it from your roommate. Since you answered my questions about market analysis with more intelligence and passion than candidates with twice your experience. Since you smiled at the receptionist on your way out and thanked her for the water she'd brought you even though most people in your position would have ignored her completely. His hand reached out, and I flinched but didn't move away as his fingers brushed against my wrist. Barely a touch, but it burned. I've memorized every detail about you, Austin. The way you tap your pen exactly 4 times before you start writing. How you always take the stairs instead of the elevator on Wednesdays. The fact that you read mystery novels during lunch in the park when the weather is nice. That small birthmark behind your left ear that you probably think nobody ever notices. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Dawson's expression shifted slightly. Something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before the mask of control slid back into place. Because from the moment I saw you, I knew you would either complete me or destroy me. And I've spent 6 months trying to figure out which it would be. His thumb pressed against my pulse point, feeling my racing heartbeat. What I've discovered is that I don't care which option it is, as long as you're part of my life. He stepped back, releasing my wrist, and the sudden absence of his touch left me oddly cold. You should go home now, Austin. Process what you've learned today. Think about what it means. We'll discuss this further tomorrow. His tone had shifted back to the professional CEO voice as if we'd just finished a normal business meeting. Oh, and those financial projections you came here to print. They're on the desk. Don't forget them. I grabbed the papers with shaking hands and fled his office, feeling his eyes tracking my every movement. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt endless. My coworkers passed by, chatting about their weekends, completely unaware that my entire reality had just shattered and reformed into something unrecognizable. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto my couch, the printed reports scattering across the floor. My phone buzzed with a new message. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dawson, sleep well tonight, Austin. I'll see you in my dreams just as I have every night for the past 6 months. Tomorrow we begin something new. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, my mind racing through impossible questions. What did he want from me? What was I supposed to do? Should I go to the police? Quit my job? Pretend this never happened? But the most terrifying question of all, the one I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. Why wasn't I as horrified as I should be? Why did some dark hidden part of me feel electrified by his confession? What did that say about me? I didn't sleep at all that night. Going home had been impossible the previous night. Not physically, though that would have been difficult enough with Dawson essentially trapping me in his office after everyone else had left. The building had emptied gradually as evening shadows stretched across the polished floors. I watched from Dawson's office window as employees filed out to the parking garage, heading home to their normal lives where their bosses didn't maintain obsessive surveillance files. When the last person departed, Dawson locked his office door with a decisive click that made my pulse spike. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to the leather couch against the far wall. It wasn't a request. The authority in his voice, the same tone he used when negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, left no room for argument. My legs moved automatically, carrying me to the couch even as my mind screamed warnings. The cushions felt too soft, too comfortable for a conversation that would probably destroy what remained of my sense of security. Dawson remained standing for a moment, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Lights from surrounding buildings cast strange shadows across his face, making him look simultaneously powerful and dangerous. Then he moved, settling into the opposite end of the couch with the calculated grace of someone who had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times. We need to establish some facts, he began, His fingers steepled beneath his chin in a gesture I'd seen him use during board meetings. First, acknowledge what you discovered on my laptop. You've been stalking me, I stated flatly, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Collecting photos, documenting my routine, writing about me like I'm some kind of research subject. Accurate, though I prefer comprehensive observation to stalking. A slight smile touched his lips. Second fact, you could have left the moment you saw those files. You could have run to HR, called the police, contacted a lawyer, but you didn't. You stayed and read more. Why? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I wanted to deny it, to claim shock had paralyzed me, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Morbid fascination had kept me clicking through folders, reading entries, discovering the depth of his fixation. I was trying to understand, I said carefully, trying to figure out if you were dangerous. And what conclusion did you reach? Dawson leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those penetrating gray eyes dissecting every micro-expression on my face. Am I dangerous, Austin? Yes, I whispered, but maybe not in the way I initially thought. Something flickered across his expression, satisfaction mixed with relief. He stood abruptly, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it over a nearby chair. The gesture felt intimate somehow, as if he was shedding armor, revealing something more vulnerable beneath the CEO exterior. He rolled up his sleeves methodically, exposing strong forearms marked with faint scars I'd never noticed before. Let me tell you what actually happened, he said, returning to his seat, but closer now. Close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from his body. 6 months ago, you walked into my company for an interview. You were nervous, your resume trembled in your hands during introductions, but when we discussed market strategies, you transformed. Your eyes lit up. You gestured passionately about consumer behavior patterns. You challenged my assumptions with research I hadn't considered. His hand moved to rest on the couch cushion between us, not touching me but close enough that I felt hyper-aware of its presence. After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Initially, I dismissed it as professional interest. You were clearly qualified for the position, but then I found myself reviewing the security footage from your interview, watching the way you fidgeted with your watch when considering difficult questions, how you smiled at your own nervousness. That's when it started, I realized aloud. The obsession, that's when I acknowledged it. He corrected. The obsession itself began the instant you walked through my door. I just didn't recognize it immediately. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. I've built empires, Austin. I've negotiated with politicians and outsmarted competitors who've spent decades in this industry. But controlling my feelings for you? Impossible. The more I tried to maintain professional distance, the more I needed to know everything about you. So you violated my privacy instead. Bitterness crept into my tone. You turned me into a project, a case study for your personal entertainment. No. The word came out sharp, almost angry. You were never entertainment. You were sustenance. Watching you became as necessary as breathing. Those moments when you thought no one was paying attention, when you'd hum under your breath or doodle in margins during boring meetings, those were the only times I felt genuinely alive. He reached for my hand, and this time I let him take it. His palm was warm, slightly calloused, and his grip trembled almost imperceptibly. I know this isn't normal, Austin. I know I've crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, but I'm not apologizing for wanting you, for needing to be close to you in whatever way possible. What do you expect from me? My voice barely carried across the small space between us. What happens now that I know? Dawson's thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, the repetitive motion simultaneously soothing and electrifying. That depends entirely on you. I can offer you a transfer to another location. I've already prepared the paperwork. You'd never have to see me again. Your career would continue unaffected. I'd even write you a glowing recommendation letter. Or? I prompted because I could hear the unspoken alternative in his tone. Or you could stay. His free hand moved to cup my jaw, forcing me to meet his intense gaze. You could give me a chance to show you that what I feel isn't just obsession or possession. That underneath all the inappropriate surveillance and boundary violations, there's genuine emotion, something real and powerful and potentially extraordinary. You're asking me to willingly enter a relationship with someone who's been stalking me for half a year. I tried to inject skepticism into the question, but it came out sounding more curious than condemning. I'm asking you to acknowledge that you felt something when you read those files. He countered. Fear, yes. Violation, absolutely. But also, something else. A spark of recognition maybe. Or possibly even flattery, that someone paid such detailed attention to the small things that make you uniquely yourself. I wanted to deny it, to maintain moral high ground, to be righteously outraged. But he was right. Buried beneath layers of appropriate horror had been a tiny thrill, the intoxicating realization that someone really saw me in ways I'd never experienced before. This is insane, I muttered, more to myself than him, completely. He agreed, and suddenly his lips were inches from mine, his breath warm against my skin. But insanity and passion often occupy the same space. The question is whether you're brave enough to explore that territory with me. He released me then, standing and moving back to his desk, creating physical distance that felt like a test. Go home, Austin. Think about everything I've said. Tomorrow morning, if you want the transfer, come to my office before 9 and we'll process the paperwork. If you're willing to consider the alternative. He trailed off meaningfully. I gathered my things on autopilot, my mind spinning through implications and possibilities. At the door I paused. What if I can't decide? Dawson's smile held dark promise. Then I'll wait. I've been patient for 6 months. I can manage a little longer. The elevator ride down felt surreal, and stepping into the cool night air didn't provide the clarity I desperately needed. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Dawson, you forgot your coffee mug in my office. The one with the faded bookstore logo that you bought during your trip to Seattle 2 years ago. I'll keep it safe until you come back for it. The message was simultaneously comforting and unsettling, proof that his knowledge of me extended far beyond office observations. I drove home in a daze, his words echoing through my thoughts. When I finally collapsed into bed hours later, sleep remained elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those folders filled with my name, felt his hand against my skin, heard his voice promising things both terrifying and tempting. What kind of person was I becoming if I actually considered his offer? I called in sick for 3 consecutive days. Tuesday morning, I woke with Dawson's proposition hanging over me like storm clouds. Wednesday, I paced my apartment trying to logic my way through impossible choices. Thursday, I finally admitted the truth. I wasn't staying home because I feared him. I was staying home because I feared my own response to him. Each day brought messages that I couldn't bring myself to delete or block. Dawson, Tuesday 8:47 a.m. The morning briefing felt incomplete without you. Jenkins presented the quarterly analysis. He used 17 unnecessary adjectives and completely missed the point about emerging markets. You would have noticed immediately. Dawson, Wednesday 2:33 p.m. I walked past your desk today. Someone from facilities had already started boxing up your things, assuming you'd resigned. I told them to stop. Your space remains exactly as you left it. Your coffee mug is still on my desk. Dawson, Thursday 6:18 p.m. I'm not trying to pressure you. Take whatever time you need. But know that every day you're gone feels like missing a vital organ. That probably sounds melodramatic. I don't care. It's true. Friday morning, I finally returned to the office. Though I'd made no decision about transfers or relationships or any of the impossible variables Dawson had laid before me. I just knew I couldn't hide anymore. The security guard greeted me normally. Apparently my absence hadn't triggered any corporate gossip. Small mercies. I avoided Dawson's floor entirely, taking the long route to my desk and burying myself in backlogged emails. But around 10 o'clock my phone rang with an internal extension I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mr. Blake? An unfamiliar voice greeted me. This is Sarah from Human Resources. Mr. Cross requested that you join him in the HR conference room at your earliest convenience. My stomach dropped. Did he say why? Just that it's regarding your employment status. Nothing to worry about, purely procedural. I made my way to the HR floor with leaden feet, trying to prepare for whatever confrontation awaited. But when I reached the conference room and opened the door, only one person sat inside. Dawson occupied the head chair, looking impeccable in a navy suit, his expression unreadable. Close the door, he instructed. I obeyed automatically, my hand trembling slightly on the handle. The room felt too small despite its generous size, the walls seeming to contract around us. Dawson gestured to the chair directly across from him, and I sat, noting the manila envelope resting on the polished table between us. "I've been thinking," he began without preamble, "about what I'm really asking of you. About the impossibility of expecting rational decisions when I've behaved so irrationally." He pushed the envelope toward me. "This is your transfer to our Boston office. Everything is approved. Relocation package, salary increase. Excellent team. HR has signed off. All it needs is your signature." I stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. "Why Boston?" "Far enough that you'd never have to see me," he replied. "Close enough that you'd remain within the company if that matters to your career trajectory. It's the cleanest exit I could arrange." "You're letting me go." The statement came out flatter than I intended. "I'm giving you freedom," he corrected, "which is what I should have done from the beginning instead of indulging my obsession." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the parking garage. With his back to me, his shoulders looked tense, despite his controlled voice. I convinced myself that my feelings justified the invasion of privacy, that my intentions somehow made the stalking acceptable. But staying awake for 3 nights replaying our conversation made me realize something. "What?" I prompted when he didn't continue. He turned to face me and I was startled to see genuine anguish in his expression. That I was willing to destroy something precious before it even had a chance to exist. If we tried to build a relationship on the foundation I created, surveillance and manipulation, it would always be poisoned. You'd always question whether your feelings were genuine or just Stockholm Syndrome. I'd always wonder if you stayed out of fear rather than desire. "So this is you being noble?" Skepticism crept into my tone. "Letting me walk away? This is me being honest for the first time since we met." He moved closer but stopped several feet away, maintaining distance. "I want you, Austin. I want you with an intensity that keeps me awake at night and distracted during board meetings. But I want you to want me too, freely, completely, without coercion or obligation." He returned to his chair, fingers drumming once against the table before stilling. "Take the transfer. Start fresh somewhere I haven't contaminated with my obsession." And maybe his voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Maybe someday we'll meet again under better circumstances. Maybe in 5 years you'll walk into a coffee shop and I'll be there and we can have a real conversation without all this baggage." The envelope sat between us like a bridge to a different future. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the paper, feeling the weight of documents inside that could rewrite my entire trajectory. Boston. A new office, new colleagues who knew nothing about late-night surveillance or obsessive CEO confessions. Freedom. But as I held the envelope, Dawson's hand suddenly covered mine, stopping me from opening it. "Before you decide, I need you to answer one question honestly. Can you do that for me?" I nodded, unable to find words. "These past 3 days when you were home," he said carefully, "did you think about me? Not about the stalking or the inappropriate behavior or the moral implications. Just me. The person underneath all the mistakes." The question hung between us, demanding truth. And the truth was complicated and uncomfortable and potentially damaging, because yes, I had thought about him. Constantly. Obsessively, even ironic, given the circumstances. I'd replayed our conversation countless times, analyzing every word, every gesture. I'd remembered the way his voice softened when he talked about watching me, the tremor in his hands when he touched me, the raw vulnerability that had flickered across his features. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "I thought about you." Something shifted in his expression, hope mixed with caution. "And what did you think?" "That you're dangerous," I said honestly. "That you're unstable and possessive and you've violated my privacy in ways that should be unforgivable. That any rational person would run as far and fast as possible." "But," he prompted, because he could hear the unspoken word in my tone. "But I also thought about how no one has ever paid attention to me the way you do. How you notice things that I barely notice about myself. How you remember details that most people forget within seconds of hearing them." I pulled my hand away from the envelope, leaving it unopened. "I thought about how it felt when you touched me, not just physically but the way you looked at me like I was the most important person in your universe." Dawson's breath caught audibly. "Austin, I'm not saying I forgive you," I interrupted. "I'm not saying this isn't completely insane, but I'm also not saying no. Not yet." He stood slowly, movements careful as if approaching something wild that might bolt. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need time," I replied. "Real time, not 3 days of hiding in my apartment." I need to figure out if what I'm feeling is genuine attraction or just my brain trying to make sense of an abnormal situation. And you, I pointed at him firmly, you need to prove that you can respect boundaries. No more surveillance. No more manipulation. If this is going to happen, it happens honestly. I can do that, he agreed immediately. Whatever you need. Whatever timeline works for you. And we start over, I added. Not as CEO and employee with this horrible history between us. As two people trying to figure out if there's something real worth exploring. A smile touched his lips, genuine, relieved, almost boyish in its hopefulness. Like a proper first date? Eventually, I conceded. After I've had time to process and you've demonstrated that you can be normal for more than 5 consecutive minutes. He laughed, the sound surprising in its lightness. I can't promise normal, but I can promise honest effort. I stood, pushing the unopened envelope back across the table toward him. Keep this in your desk. If I change my mind, if this doesn't work or if I realize I can't get past what happened, I want to know the escape route still exists. Fair enough. He picked up the envelope, fingers lingering on it briefly before tucking it under his arm. Can I walk you back to your floor? No, I said firmly. We're maintaining professional distance at work. No special treatment. No lingering looks. No private meetings unless absolutely necessary. If anyone finds out about this situation before we've figured out what it actually is, it becomes exponentially more complicated. Understood. He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. Austin, thank you for not running. For giving us a chance. Even a small one. I didn't respond, just watched as he left the conference room, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone, I collapsed back into the chair, my heart racing, my mind spinning with the magnitude of what I'd just agreed to. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. But for the first time since discovering those files, I felt something other than fear and confusion. I felt curious, intrigued, maybe even hopeful that underneath the obsession and surveillance, there might be something worth discovering. My phone buzzed with a message. Dawson, your coffee mug is in the bottom drawer of your desk. I cleaned it personally. No surveillance required, just wanted you to have it back where it belongs. Despite everything, I smiled. I didn't go to Boston. The unsigned transfer letter remained in Dawson's desk drawer. And the moment that decision became clear, when I showed up for work the following Monday without any mention of relocation, something fundamental shifted between us. He didn't acknowledge it verbally, didn't make any grand gestures, but his entire demeanor transformed in subtle ways that only someone paying close attention would notice. And I was definitely paying attention now. Over the next 3 weeks, Dawson began involving me in projects far above my pay grade. Strategy meetings where I'd previously been invisible suddenly included requests for my input. During a quarterly review presentation, he actually paused mid-sentence to ask my opinion on market positioning, leaving several senior executives visibly confused about why a junior analyst was being consulted. What did you think of the Rodriguez account proposal? He asked one afternoon, stopping by my desk with 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one mysteriously for me, prepared exactly how I liked it, despite never telling him my preferences. It's solid, I replied carefully, aware of curious glances from nearby coworkers. Though the timeline seems aggressive given their current infrastructure limitations. His smile was almost imperceptible. Exactly what I thought. Draft me an alternative timeline by end of day. It wasn't really a question, but it also wasn't quite an order. Something in between, a request from someone who valued my judgment. I nodded and he walked away, leaving the coffee and a trail of confused speculation in his wake. People started noticing. In the break room, I overheard Jennifer from accounting whisper to Marcus from IT, "Since when does Cross personally deliver coffee to anyone?" I pretended not to hear, but my face burned with awareness. The professional attention was one thing. What happened after hours was entirely different. 4 weeks after our conference room conversation, Dawson sent a text at 6:47 p.m. "Everyone's gone. My office. Only if you want to." The only if you want to mattered. It was the first time he'd offered me explicit choice without pressure or manipulation. I gathered my things, locked my workstation, and took the elevator to the executive floor with my heart hammering against my ribs. His office door stood open. Dawson sat on the leather couch, not behind his imposing desk with his jacket discarded and tie loosened. The informality of it struck me as intentional, a deliberate attempt to create different energy than our previous charged encounters. "Lock it," he said quietly as I entered. I hesitated. "If someone sees, no one's here." I checked the security logs personally. He met my eyes. "And Austin, when we're alone, call me Dawson. Not sir, not Mr. Cross, just Dawson." The way he said my name, soft, almost reverent, made something flutter in my chest. I locked the door and approached the couch, sitting a careful distance away. "These past few weeks have been complicated," Dawson began, running a hand through his hair in a gesture I'd learned meant he was nervous. "For both of us, I imagine. I've never needed anyone the way I need you. It's terrifying. Honestly, this situation is completely complicated." I agreed, my fingers twisting together anxiously. "You're my boss. There are power dynamics at play that we can't just ignore." "I know," he interrupted gently, "which is why I need to ask you something important. Will you let me try? Actually try, not through surveillance or manipulation, but like a normal person attempting to date someone they're interested in." My pulse quickened. "What does trying look like?" "Dinner," he said simply. "Conversations where I learn things by asking rather than researching. Getting to know who you are when you're comfortable being yourself." He reached for my hand slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving me time to pull away. "I messed up catastrophically with the stalking. But if you'll give me one genuine chance to show you who I am without all the obsessive behavior, I promise I'll do everything right this time." His hand was warm around mine, and I realized I'd stopped breathing. "One chance," I finally said. "But Dawson, if you keep secrets again or try to manipulate me, I won't." He lifted my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles with surprising tenderness. "You have my word." That night marked the beginning of something entirely new. We started meeting outside the city limits where no one would recognize the CEO of Cross Industries. Small Italian restaurants with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Late-night drives along coastal highways with the windows down and jazz playing softly. Hidden moments in his office when the building emptied, talking until security made their final rounds. I discovered aspects of Dawson that surveillance files could never capture. He collected vintage records and spent Saturday mornings at estate sales searching for rare albums. He'd never learned to swim because he'd nearly drowned as a child and still avoided deep water. His cooking skills were unexpectedly impressive. Apparently his grandmother had taught him before she passed, and the kitchen was where he felt most human. "Why heights?" I asked one evening as we sat in his car, overlooking the city from a safe distance back from the cliff edge. "Control," he admitted. "At ground level I can manage variables, predict outcomes, maintain order. Up high I'm at gravity's mercy. I hate being powerless." "Is that why you—" I trailed off, not wanting to dredge up his surveillance behavior. "Tried to control you?" He finished my thought. "Partially. You were this unpredictable element that disrupted my entire carefully constructed existence. Watching you was my way of pretending I had some power over what you made me feel." 8 weeks passed this way. Secret dinners became inside jokes. Careful distance evolved into comfortable proximity. Professional interactions at work masked the fact that Dawson now knew how I took my tea, which authors I loved, that I had a scar on my ankle from a childhood bike accident, that I hummed when I concentrated not out of nervousness but because my mother used to do the same thing. And somewhere in those stolen moments between the life everyone saw and the life we were building in shadows, I realized I was falling. Not because of his power or position or the intoxicating attention he paid to my existence. I was falling because beneath the obsession and control issues and stalking behavior, there was a man who looked at me like I hung the moon and stars. A man who was, against all logic, falling just as hard. Living a double life proved both exhilarating and exhausting. At work, we maintained perfect professionalism. The CEO and his increasingly valued analyst, nothing more. But after hours we became something else entirely. 2 months into our arrangement, I had a drawer at his penthouse. My toothbrush sat next to his in the bathroom. His refrigerator stocked the specific brand of orange juice I preferred. We developed routines. Tuesday evenings meant cooking together, usually ending with flour in my hair and Dawson's surprisingly playful side emerging. Fridays we'd drive to different towns within a 100-mile radius, exploring restaurants and bookstores where anonymity was guaranteed. Weekends blurred together in comfortable domesticity that felt dangerously close to genuine relationship rather than the complicated arrangement we'd started with. But one Thursday night, everything shattered. I was in his penthouse kitchen preparing coffee when Dawson approached from behind, wrapping his arms around my waist, a gesture that had become familiar, comforting even. But his body felt rigid against mine, tension radiating through every muscle. "I need to tell you something," he murmured against my ear, his voice carrying weight that made my stomach clench. I turned in his embrace to face him. "What's wrong?" He released me, stepping back to create physical distance that felt ominous. "The files I kept on you weren't only from your time at Cross Industries. You need to know the complete truth." My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" Dawson moved to the living room window, his back to me, silhouetted against the city lights. "Do you remember where you worked during college? That small cafe downtown. The one with the terrible espresso machine and mismatched furniture." Blood rushed in my ears. That cafe. I'd worked there part-time for nearly 2 years, putting myself through school. I'd quit almost 3 years ago after graduation. "How do you know about that?" "Because I was there." He turned to face me, and in the dim lighting, his expression looked haunted. "I came in one morning for coffee. You were 21, finishing your senior year. You served me cappuccino and smiled when I fumbled my wallet. That smile destroyed me, Austin, completely rewired something fundamental in my brain." "Dawson." My voice came out strangled. "I started coming every day, learned your schedule, memorized your routines. When you quit after graduation, I couldn't just let you disappear." He took one step toward me, then stopped as if approaching a wounded animal. "I hired a private investigator, tracked where you lived, where you applied for jobs, monitored your social media accounts under fake profiles." The room tilted. "How long?" 3 years. The admission fell between us like a stone. "When you applied to various companies, I used connections to ensure those applications went nowhere. Then I made certain Cross Industries was your only viable option. I manipulated HR into interviewing you, influenced the hiring committee's decision. Every step of your career path was orchestrated to bring you into my orbit. Get away from me." The words came out flat and cold. "Austin, please." 3 years? I was shouting now, backing toward where I'd left my phone and keys. "You've been manipulating my entire adult life? My career, my opportunities, everything was just you pulling strings like I'm some puppet in your sick obsession." He moved to block my path. Not aggressively but desperately. "Yes, I manipulated circumstances. I did reprehensible things. But Austin, what we have now, the conversations, the connection, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, I didn't manufacture those feelings. Your emotions developed organically." "Organically?" I shoved his chest hard. "Nothing about this was organic. You engineered my entire reality, and yet you're still here." His hands caught my wrists firmly but without pain, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You could have taken that transfer to Boston. The paperwork was ready, approved, waiting for one signature. But you didn't sign it. Why? Because you felt this connection too. Because despite everything, there's something real between us." I wanted to deny it, to scream that he was delusional, but the words stuck in my throat because he was right. I could have left, multiple times, multiple opportunities, but I'd stayed. "I'm sorry." His forehead dropped to touch mine, his voice breaking. "I'm desperately sorry for manipulating your life. But I'm not sorry for loving you. I know that makes me a monster, but it's the truth." I wrenched away from him, grabbing my jacket and keys. "I need space. Time to think about whether any of this was ever real. Take whatever time you need." He didn't try to stop me as I headed for the door. "I'll be here, waiting. Always waiting for you." I left his penthouse with tears blurring my vision, my entire sense of reality crumbling. Had I ever made a single choice that was truly mine? Or had Dawson's invisible hand been guiding every major decision for 3 years? The worst part, the truly terrible, unforgivable part, was that despite everything, despite the manipulation and lies and orchestrated reality, I'd fallen in love with him. And now I had no idea if those feelings were genuine or just another result of his meticulous planning. 5 days passed in agonizing silence. I ignored 17 calls from Dawson, left 23 text messages unread. At work I took lunch at different times, used the stairs instead of elevators, avoided any possibility of accidental encounters. My apartment felt simultaneously too empty and suffocatingly small, every corner filled with thoughts of him that I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable rain hammering against my windows. I'd spent the day alternating between anger and longing, trying to logic my way through impossible emotional equations. The doorbell rang at 7:30, startling me from my thoughts. Probably a delivery driver with the wrong address. I opened the door without checking the peephole. Dawson stood there, completely drenched. No umbrella, no jacket, his expensive shirt plastered to his skin and hair dripping water onto my doormat. He looked absolutely wrecked. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes, stubble covering his usually clean-shaven jaw, the polished CEO facade completely stripped away. "Please." His voice cracked on the single word. "Just talk to me. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave if you want me to." I should have slammed the door. Should have told him to leave and never come back. Instead, I stepped aside wordlessly, letting him enter. He stood dripping on my hardwood floor, looking lost and uncertain in a way I'd never witnessed before. I threw a towel at him without speaking, then moved to the kitchen to put the kettle on. The silence stretched painful and heavy between us. Finally, Dawson spoke from where he remained near the door, as if afraid to intrude further into my space. "I know I destroyed everything." He used the towel mechanically, not really drying himself so much as going through motions. "If I'd been honest from the beginning, told you about the cafe, about the investigator, about engineering your interview, you never would have given me a chance. And I was too selfish, too desperate to risk that." I poured tea into 2 mugs, my hands surprisingly steady, despite the turmoil churning through my chest. "You should have trusted me to make my own decisions. I should have." He took a tentative step further into the apartment. "I should have done 1,000 things differently." When I turned around with the mugs, I found him on his knees on my living room floor. Actually kneeling, this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, literally on his knees in my apartment. "What are you doing?" The question came out strangled, begging. Tears tracked down his face, mixing with rainwater. "I'm begging you, Austin. One more chance. I'll show you everything. Every investigator report. Every file I compiled. Every manipulation I orchestrated. Complete transparency. No more secrets. No more lies. Just please don't give up on us." I'd never seen him cry before. Never seen him this vulnerable. This broken. The CEO armor had completely shattered, leaving only a man who looked like he was drowning. I set the mugs down and moved to him, taking his hands and pulling him to standing. We faced each other, both damaged, both desperate, both terrified of what came next. "If we do this," I said slowly, each word carefully chosen, "it has to be different. Complete honesty, no manipulation, no hidden agendas, equal partners, not puppet master and puppet." "Yes." He cupped my face in trembling hands. "Anything. Everything. I swear I'll delete every file. Fire the investigator. Give you access to my entire life if that's what you need to trust me again. I need you to understand something." I held his wrists, keeping his hands against my face. "I fell in love with you. Not because you engineered circumstances or manipulated variables. Despite all of that, the person you are when you're cooking breakfast or talking about your grandmother or admitting your fears. That's who I love. But I need to know that person is real." "He's real." Dawson's voice broke. "The man who loves you is completely real, even if the circumstances that brought us together were manufactured. My feelings were never fake. Austin. They've been the only genuine thing about this entire situation." I kissed him then, not out of forgiveness exactly, but out of desperate need to believe that something in this twisted situation could be salvaged. He kissed back like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning, his arms wrapping around me with careful intensity as if afraid I might disappear. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. "Delete the files. All of them. Tonight. And I want to see you do it." "Done." He didn't hesitate. "Anything else?" "Therapy." The word surprised us both. "For you, for me. Maybe couples counseling. If we're going to make this work, we need professional help processing everything that's happened. I'll make appointments first thing Monday morning." He agreed immediately. We stood there in my living room, holding each other while rain continued drumming against the windows. Nothing was fixed. We had months, maybe years of difficult work ahead. Trust would have to be rebuilt from nothing. But we were together, finally honest, finally facing the darkness between us instead of hiding from it. "I love you," Dawson whispered into my hair. "However long it takes for you to fully believe that, I'll prove it every single day. I love you too." The admission felt both liberating and terrifying. "Even though you're completely insane and turned my life upside down." His laugh was watery but genuine. "Insane for you. Only for you." We moved to the couch, tangled together, and talked through the night. He showed me files on his phone, deleting them one by one while I watched. Made calls to terminate his investigator's services. Answered every painful question I asked, without deflection or excuse. By the time dawn light crept through my windows, we'd laid the foundation for something new. Not the relationship built on obsession and secrets, but something honest and difficult and real. It wouldn't be easy. But maybe, together, we could transform something toxic into something worth keeping. Maybe love could grow even from the darkest soil.